Hi, and welcome to this episode of John's Model Kit Review. In today's fun review video, we'll be taking a look at the Monogram Heinkel HE111 Blitz bomber. This kit was originally released in 1994. It was warmly welcomed by the modeling community. It was the first HE111 kit available in 1/48 scale. This kit has subsequently been reboxed many times and by various companies. It has been released as a Monogram kit, as a Monogram Pro Modeler kit, as a Revell Monogram kit, and as a Hasegawa Revell Monogram kit. The vast majority of the plastic parts is the same for all of the boxings, so this review is appropriate for any of the boxings of this kit. In this review, I'll give a brief history of the HE111. We'll go through the kit instructions, and we'll talk about any problem areas to watch out for during construction. We'll take a look at the detailing on the smaller parts for the landing gear and for the interior of the aircraft. We'll also take a look at the surface detail on the exterior of the kit, as well as the fit of the major parts of the kit. We'll look at the clear parts and we'll talk about the clarity and fit of these. We'll take a look at the kit supply decals and we'll talk about the quality of those. We'll also look at the marking options that are included in this kit. And I'll also touch on any aftermarket items that I plan to use during this build. A brief history of the HE111. The Heinkel HE111 was the only twin-engine German bomber that was used from the first day of World War II until the last. It was originally designed as a fast, medium bomber, and it proved to be devastatingly effective in the Spanish Civil War and over Poland, where it was faster than most of the fighter aircraft that were ranged against it. However, during the Battle of Britain, when it was faced with the Spitfire and Hurricane fighters, the lightly armed and initially unescorted HE-111s suffered prohibitive losses. The only alternative was to operate under the cover of darkness. Guided by radio beacons, the Luftwaffe began their night blitz in early 1941. The HE-111 could carry a wide range of weapon loadouts, and this kit includes plastic parts that allow you to model a conventional bomber, as well as one outfitted with 2,000-pound blockbuster bombs. It also includes the parts to model a torpedo bomber with dual externally carried torpedoes. Looking at the instructions, step 1 and 2 cover the cockpit assembly. The small parts here are very nicely detailed. On some of the small parts, there is a decent amount of flash that will need to be cleaned up around the seams. The detail on the firewall just behind the cockpit is also very nice. This picture shows the completed interior, and the pilot seat itself has molded on seat belts. In step 3, we're installing the windows into the fuselage halves, and we're also installing the forward and rear cockpit bulkheads. These have wing spars that protrude through the fuselage and into the wing assemblies. You can see that there are quite a few ejector pin marks that are visible in this photo. Most of these won't be seen, but there are several that definitely need to be cleaned up prior to assembly. We're also assembling the tail wheel, and the tail wheel itself has a couple of ejector pin marks on it that need to be cleaned up. In step 4, we're closing up the fuselage assembly, and in step 5, we're assembling the tail planes and attaching those to the fuselage. Fitting the fuselage halves together, it looks like we should be able to get a pretty decent fit all around. I would definitely take my time. This is a very long seam around the bottom of the fuselage and around the top of the fuselage. And so you want to do your best to get these parts aligned very carefully prior to committing to glue, and that will help minimize the amount of cleanup needed after assembly. The tail planes themselves assemble easily and they fit almost perfectly. In step 6, we're starting the wing assembly. The instructions have you adding the landing gear doors at this point. I chose to leave these off, and we'll talk about why in a little bit later step. And then we're joining the upper and lower wings. I was able to get a good fit all the way around the wing leading and trailing edges. Looking at the landing gear doors and the wheel well sides themselves, once again you can see more ejector pin marks. These are going to be difficult to clean up. However, the good news is they're not terribly visible once the kit is completed. In step 7 and 8, we're building the main landing gear and installing that in the aircraft. The landing gear parts themselves look great. There's a lot of crisp detail on the landing gear parts, and there's only some minor flash that needs to be cleaned up on these parts. I like the fact that the tires on this kit are weighted and they have a flat spot at the bottom. In step 9, we're building the engine nacelles, and in step 10, we're attaching the radiators and attaching the nacelles to the wing fronts. I would call the fit here okay. You really want to focus on getting all the parts aligned and dry fitted properly. You'll still have some cleanup on some of the portions where the nacelle meets the wing, and you may need a little bit of filler and putty in this area. In step 11, we're attaching the wing assembly to the fuselage assembly. I was able to get a perfect fit on the upper wing root on both sides of the aircraft. On the underside of the aircraft, the port wing fit very nicely as well. However, I do have a noticeable gap on the underside of the starboard wing. I plan on using some clamps and some more glue to minimize this seam, and I still may have to use some putty or some sort of filler in this gap. There's also a gap on the forward section of the starboard wing that will need to be filled. In step 12, we're building the ventral assembly. I plan on gluing the machine gun, and that's part 59, into the gondola canopy, and that is part 92. I'll probably cut off the gun barrel and reinstall that at final assembly. Step 13 is a multi-part assembly for the weapons. There are 3 options included in this kit for the bomb bay area. The first one we'll look at is the torpedo assembly. The parts for the torpedoes and for the 1,000-pound bombs seem to be very nicely molded. Once the torpedoes are mounted to the bomb bay cover, we're just installing those onto the aircraft. You can also simply use part 39 if you are building the standard bomber version. In the final option, we are building the version with 2 blockbuster bombs. And in this step, we're just building the bombs, and then we're mounting those to the underside of the aircraft. In step 14, we are mounting the cockpit assembly into the fuselage assembly. And in step 15, we're just adding some more parts here. I would say just take your time with these steps. Make sure you detail paint these nicely, and the interior should look really nice through the cockpit canopy. This picture gives you a good idea of what the assembly will look like when it's completed. In step 16, we're adding some parts to the cockpit canopy first, and then we are mounting that to the aircraft. This is another area where you really want to take your time. You really want to dry fit the parts and make sure you get a very good fit all around before committing to glue. Looking at the clear parts themselves, they appear to be nicely molded. There seems to be crisp definition on the clear parts of the canopy. There are quite a few clear parts included in this kit, but they all seem to be of very good quality. I plan on using a set of masks for this kit. I have the Montex masks. However, I would recommend the Edouard masks over these. I have not had good success with Montex mask in the past. In step 17, we're adding the upper machine gun, and then in 18, we're adding the canopy over that. I'll probably hold off on this step until after all the painting and weathering is done on the aircraft. In step 19, we're just adding the props to the aircraft and a couple of other final bits. I don't anticipate any problems with this step. Looking at the marking options, the first marking option included in this kit is for an HE111H4 of 8 kg55. It was painted as a night intruder, and it operated from Doux, France in 1941 during the Battle of Britain. The second marking option is for a torpedo-equipped aircraft. It's an HE111H5 of 2 kg26, operating from Grosseto, Italy in 1941. Looking at the decals themselves, I've got lots of experience with the Monogram decals, and in my experience they have functioned very well. The only potential problem area I see with these is they might be a little bit out of register on the white color, and so you may have to trim a couple of the decals so they don't have a white outline where it shouldn't be. In conclusion, looking at the exterior surface detailing on this kit, it is represented with finely engraved panel lines. The surface detail actually looks very nice. The fit on most of the parts is going to be very good, although there are going to be areas where you're going to need to use some modeling skill. You'll need to be able to clean up some seams and to fill a couple of gaps on the assembly of this aircraft. My only real gripe with this kit is the number of ejector pin marks on the interior of some of the plastic parts, including the interior of the fuselage sides, the landing gear bays, and the tail wheel. Most of the small parts on this kit are very nicely molded. There's lots of detail. I think the interior of the kit is very nicely detailed as well. That should look good through the cockpit transparencies. The transparencies themselves look nice, as do the decals that are included with the kit. I think Monogram has done a very good job with this kit. It's a relatively large kit, and yet it is not overly parts heavy. It manages to be very well detailed in the areas that will be visible on the finished kit. If you take your time, I think you'll be rewarded with a very nice build. Well, I'd love to know what you guys think. If any of you out there have built the Monogram, Revell, or Hasegawa 148 scale HE111 previously, please let me know in the comment section below. As always, I hope you found this video entertaining and informative, and until next time, model on.